Yeah, no, David Holmgren for me is sort of the main, I don't know what the right word is, but sort of, I guess you could use the word linchpin, that sort of connects a lot of different strands of ecological thought together. So for me, like if you think about Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, you kind of have two different intellectual branches in permaculture, but with David Holmgren, he goes, the way I see it anyway, he goes more deeply into ecology as a science.
Yeah.
And he sort of has the intellectual history as well. So like the brothers, Eugene Odum and Howard T. Odum, especially Howard T. Odum.
Well,
really,
they're brothers,
yeah. He really had a big impression on him.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started reading David Holmgren, he started talking about entropy and Howard T. Odum, and I was like, what is this thing, entropy? And I started doing more and more research, and I realized that it's actually really quite critical to understanding ecology.
Yeah.
And it's all about order, right? It's all about how do you create order, and then that, for me, getting to the point where I understood what that meant, it just changed my whole view of ecology. Yeah. And I learned, for me, like what I try to communicate with the youth these days is that you need to try to think of ecology in terms of entropy versus syntropy, and that life is a syntropic force. And if you're doing something that builds up, regenerates your ecology, then you're working with life. I won't use the word nature because nature has both in it, but life is, primarily a syntropic force, whereas the universe, if you want to put it that way, is more entropic, right? And that's the interesting thing. And then to find out ways in which you can behave and make your practice syntropic, that's what it's all about.
That's a very good one. I like that. Yeah, I can really understand that. It's a big thing that it goes both ways. I mean, that's probably like the universe and the black holes is like, it's the same power between like organizing and dissolving. And for me also, I think also me coming from the natural science, I think David Holmgren was the one putting words on and understanding out for the system thinking, and also I think I have rediscovered the strength during the last years, because with some friends we've had like a book club, whatever you call it, and we read his book, this pathway for
sustainable future, I think, something like that,
where he described his 12 principles. And we were talking about one principle a week, and we were really digging deep into it. And now we have also, I work with these people, and we give PDCs, and we have decided that we do 2. So we meet 2 weeks, and the last week we do 2 principles a day. And it's really, we dig deep into them, and I really think that it gives, at least has given me so much energy into understanding the crash, and understanding like deep adaptation, and understanding where we are, and like we talked, the maximum power to see, okay, how should we do this?
Right.
It's there. The principles are there.
Yeah.
And those are like the basic principles. They are there. Even if we kind of move away or die or whatever, they're still there.
Yeah. I think also one of the things that inspired me was that when he wrote that Crash on Demand article in 2014. It's a really, really good paper. It's not very big, but it sort of like boils down his perspective on how ecology is, the biosphere is falling apart, and sort of what he feels we need to do to bring about stability. He looks at like the techno, imaginary future, and then this, continuation of the way things are now, and then the crash which is happening, and then his gradual descent, right, which is what he's trying to push for. And when I read that, I was like, that's spot on. That's what we need. And I like also how he talks about, you just need critical mass for it to happen. You don't need everybody to be on board, and just trying to move and nudge people in that direction as soon as possible.
Good. Yeah.
So I think it's actually really a radical message, actually. Even though most of the time you think of David Holmgren, you just think of a nice plant-growing person, But if you read his Crash on the Manual, wow, this is powerful stuff.
I'm going to read that. That's in his collective writings, maybe.
It's actually just like a free PDF on his website. Yeah. But yeah, for me at least, it's sort of what made me go deeper into permaculture and the sort of the intellectual history of permaculture.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And what I found there is that like Eugene Odum actually wrote The Fundamentals of Ecology in 1954, which is like the textbook for ecology, right? So it's like he's very closely tied to, hard science. It's not just something taken out of nowhere.
No. And today I think it's also maybe even more important when we so many things are kind of not rooted. We are talking in ways that it's so on the surface, and we don't really know. We have heard or whatever, we kind of. So it's very interesting with a person like him and like you're now also. I think it's giving it depth.
Yeah,
I appreciate that, and I think that is also connected to having the time to do that, to understand. Yeah,
I think if we're going to get this paradigm shift that we need, this biocentric paradigm shift, we need to get people to understand the basics of ecology, and I think that's. Like, it's kind of, I don't understand why more schools don't focus on it. That we learn everything about technology and all this science stuff, but then what about ecology? And we know it's an ecological crisis, so how come more people aren't focusing on it?
So weird. I don't know if people know. I don't think people understand.
They really don't. And you start talking, most people have not heard of entropy.
Oh, no. Yeah. It's so hard. Yeah. Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird. I think we don't talk about it. And don't try to understand, and are not more interested to understand, and because it's everywhere. We can just start looking. Yeah, and
our world's it's just falling apart so quickly nowadays. You see that part falling apart, and at least for me, I wish that if more people understood why that is happening, then it would be much more easier to do something about it. But because we're so focused on production all the time, we're always thinking about how we can get as much as we can for humans instead of creating stable ecosystems over time, and that should be the prime focus.
Absolutely.
And that's where seed saving comes in.
Exactly.
You can't. Ecosystem doesn't adapt if it doesn't reproduce.
No.
And if we have a system that's just focused on production all the time and hardly any reproduction, all the reproduction is done by professionals.
Yeah.
Then the ecologies aren't adapting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is so true. Taking your own seeds.
You do it here as well?
Some.
Yeah.
Some. Like, we're also too small to take some of the seeds that will be crossbreeded too much and so on. But we do have some. Yeah.
How do you see that? How has your sort of connection to this land maybe shifted or changed throughout your permacultural path? Because I find it very interesting that you're finding some of the works now, kind of rediscovering them again and sort of reading the principles of permaculture. So how do you see that kind of...
Interesting. I think one thing on that is maybe that also the system is a little more established. It needs me less. So I have a little more kind of space.
Yeah.
And maybe calmer also, like the winter is time for me when I use the season by that, so I can read and work on it. So that's one part of it. I think things mature together. I can't really say it anymore. It's just like it's an interesting. I think it's part of understanding more deeply things, and then you have to read, look, and also it's a part of me being more involved in education. And I feel that I'm wanting to educate, to do more courses, and then I so dislike okay, I'll do it again, and I pick up my stuff and I restart again. So every time I have to I do a design on this section or this theme, and then see how should I tell this, and also I find, we started teaching in the 90s, and today people are so knowledgeable themselves, so it's like it's so rich when everybody comes together, people. So we also have to take care of that, and then you have to grow. And I see I become more a facilitator than actually a teacher. It's more like how do we talk about this? And maybe the subjects could be like something, but it's not like I know this. It's impossible. I think humility. There's two words that have been very important for me. Humility is one. And I love it because it also has to do with humans and human and all this, of course. But humility is also humility towards the land, towards the people coming in, towards everybody's strive to do their best. I think we are doing our best all the time, even if people are shitty. They don't know better. Or we don't know better all the time. But also trust or tillit. Is that trust? It's nice. And I think I have always felt the trust too. to what the land does, to what is coming, who is coming, and I know that people can be very nervous. Okay, who's going to help us? And we have so much to do. And I always feel that when that comes into my mind, there is someone coming, and then something happens.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful for that, and I think it has a little bit to do with my trust, but it's also life has taught me that. That when you also kind of this is hard. Do you want to help?
Yeah. You're sending the message to the universe.
Yeah. And then, I can help you. Yeah. Of course, don't deny we've had many hard years, and it's been really hard work, and it's not like that. It's not like I'm sitting here and say, I need some help. It's also, but I think the project and the place has taught me to be like that. Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't have managed. I mean, we can't have. If you go in Sweden, we have all these very nice places, gardens that are for show, like on the castles or old stuff, and very, very nice, but so perfect.
Yeah.
And I just had to give up that. I mean, it's no way we can do it.
Yeah.
People come here and they say, you have all this skvallerkål. Heaps. And I can show them, yeah. Welcome. That's where we have. Yeah. And it grows a lot. Yeah. And I have at least managed to spread that one all over. What can I do? Yeah. But also, I mean, people can come here and say, I could do some of this. Yeah, that's good. Then I'm happy.
Yeah.
So it's like weeds, it's high grass. I know, I try to cut the grass. We don't have so much time. We do our best.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to look at a farm from somebody else's perspective. Like, often I'm like, my farm looks messy. Or I think, and then other people come and go like, oh my God, it's super gorgeous. It all depends on what your baseline is. Yeah. And this is definitely a place where you can feel that it's like, okay, it's not, like you say, the lines aren't, everything is perfectly square, but that's not the point either. It's about being in the flow and yeah. I think it's more beautiful that way, to be honest.
It's more living.
Yeah.
I would say it's actually more living. I was at the farm this weekend she has a big market garden, and it's really amazing the production level. But it's a little dead.
Yeah.
There is something there. It's only annuals, for example. Here I see we have a lot of annuals, but we have also a lot of perennials in the system. Yeah. There's like trees, there's bushes, there's strawberries, there's asparagus, and I see it's like it's a big, it's a forest garden, but it's kind of stretched, so it's more annuals than it could be more perennials, but it's still not like only annuals.
Yeah.
And we try to there's gräslök and there is svartrot and all these things that will stay and will stay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you were speaking earlier about this, saying that you're sort of regenerating the land on another level now, that you're probably thinking of maybe perennializing a bit more and bringing those other than annuals also as to play a bigger role. And I was wondering, when you use this concept of regeneration, and we now are in an era where there's a lot of talk about regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming, and regenerative as a concept of sort of bringing these sustainable practices to the farming. And how would you sort of relate permaculture to regenerative agriculture? What is the connection there to you?
Well, in a way, I would see permaculture is like not a way to produce food. It's not like a gardening technique or a farming technique. It's more like how you put things together. How do you make a good web of connections between all the parts, all the elements. And a good permaculture design, if you are going to produce food in your design or in your project, then the regenerative methods should be in place, so to say. So I would say like permaculture is more a way of designing things together, but then I would say like if you really use permaculture, then you would not do, at least not here where we are far from a city or anything, a market garden where you import all the compost. Then no, you haven't really. You have to think again. And you always have to think again because you're always doing things that could be done better. But so I would say like the regenerative methods, which I mean, include a lot of things, but they should be in place. But the permaculture is how you put them together, how the system helps each other, and how like it's
So maybe
multifunctional. The elements are. It's like, okay, how do we meet our? It's asking, okay, what are our needs? How do we meet our needs? How can we meet them in more than one way?
So sort of regenerative for you is just a part of permaculture.
Yeah.
It's like if you're not regenerative, you're not really doing permaculture properly. But if you're just doing regenerative, that doesn't mean you're doing permaculture.
No.
There's like loads of other ways of doing regenerative.
Yeah. I think so.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, I think regenerative is a nice term, and we struggle, I think, with having words. How should we call it? Resilient, or was it regenerative? And we have to. Maybe it's just a matter of defining how you're talking. But for me, regenerative is like it's something that you can go on because it won't deplete, or you're feeding, and it's like, we had this good lunch, now we can carry on, and the good lunch is not depleting, and it's not like made of slaves somewhere else, it's all the time. So regenerative is more than food in a way. So in a way you could say it's more permaculture, but if you say regenerative agriculture, then it's, and I mean the organic movement, the organic food production is not regenerative by it, but it could be.
Yeah,
it could be, but it needs more.
Yeah, and when it has become marketized.
Yeah, it's hard.
I mean, starting from this kind of the needs of the farmers to go organic, but then becoming as part of the standardization and part of the market system and the global markets, then it has really become more towards like industrial.
One which also is a good guy, this Michael Pollan, probably you've read him.
Yeah.
He wrote about this kind of the same enterprise who did the organic line and the non-organic line, and then you start thinking, okay, how does this really work? Okay, it's probably better, or I'm quite sure it's better, but it's kind of not enough.
I think of it as being that the organic movement has the right idea and is going in the right direction, but it's trying to compete with unconventional terms. So they're like, okay, how much corn do you get per acre? Well, that's not the question. And if you're going to allow that to dominate, then you're never going to win. It's like going into a gym and trying to outcompete somebody who's taking steroids. Yeah, it's not going to work.
That's right. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
No.
You have to kind of rethink what's most important. Sure. And if you're saying that ecology, which since it's organic, the ecology should be most important. If you start off by measuring how much entropy are you creating in your ecology, then you can say, okay, that's a totally different gauge. And then organic is going to beat conventional hands down over and over again. Doesn't matter what kind of organic, it'll be better than conventional.
Excellent.
And then it's also interesting because this same kind of applies to the current sort of regenerative agriculture field, where the tendency is that big corporations are very interested in it because of its potential to increase productivity in particular ways, and sort of to become the new normal of conventional in a way, right? And it's again competing with the same indices or same categories as.
Exactly. It's all production based as well, and that's why for me at least, I always, when I talk about regenerative, I show the 5 principles, and then I say, however, I like to add a 6th one, which is that you need to have reproduction for it to be regenerative, because you can't really regenerate anything without it being reproduced. And if you're ignoring that, then firstly, it's not going to adapt. I do believe that it's smart for a region to have reproductive centers. So it's not like every farm has to be reproductive, but you should have regional cooperations. I think that's the way to go. That if many farms cooperated on reproduction, because it is a much more demanding from the sort of perspective of knowledge, and it's a more time consuming. It's a longer season, right? But it's also where all the beauty comes, all the flowers and all the insects and all that. So when you have a reproductive farm, it definitely doesn't look straight because it's you're allowing the plants to fulfill themselves.
I think we should add this to our idea of Koster, to have some area which is the reproductive area.
That would be amazing.
We were actually in a project when we had an exchange with Brazil, with small farmers there. And then when we were there, it was like in all villages or group of villages, there was this little place where they kept all the seeds and they learned how to take seeds, and it was just yeah, this is how we do it.
And that's the community seed bank revolution, which has been going on since the 70s, you know? And that's taking off, like the Norwegian seed savers, and in Sweden you've got CSAN. Thanks so much, Helena, for inviting us to come here.